Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I wanted to go over object-oriented programming, or at least the basics about it. And for that I just want to show how to create classes. I'm not going to go in depth into like some different, some very specific things, more advanced stuff. I just want to like go do sort of an overview because in my last video I had a tutorial basically on the basics of both Python and JavaScript, but this time around I just want to go over classes. And the thing is, there's a lot to classes because, object-oriented programming is an entire thing, and I don't want to go through all of it, but I do at least want to show some things about how classes work. So, to create a class in Python, you use the class keyword and you just name your class. And in JavaScript, it's basically the same thing. The class keyword and you can name your class. And then from here, colon mark is, Python, while in JavaScript you use the curly brackets. So this is why I didn't want to include this in the previous video, but there is basically in a class you could create functions that work, that these functions won't be working universally. It only works for this class. And again, I will show how to instance a class in a little bit, but basically when you create a class, you want to basically initiate it. So in Python, we use, I think they're called, uh, actually, I'm not completely sure what they're called, but there's these special types of functions that you could create, which begin and end with underscores. Right here, you could see a whole bunch of them already. But when creating a class, we want to use init because the init function is a function that initiates the class. Now for JavaScript, we have the same thing, but it's called a constructor. And now that I think of it, I don't think we have to use, I don't think we have to name the, use the keyword for functions in JavaScript. Let me just search this up real quick. Classes in JavaScript. I just need to check this real quick just to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. And yeah, you don't need to create, for example, functions. You use the function keyword. You don't actually have to create or use a function keyword when it comes to creating functions in a class. So next, of course, we want to have our actual code for the function. But before we could do that, we need some parameters. Now, always in Python, you are going to need your first parameter to be named self. Now, I'm pretty sure you could name it something else, but generally it is self because the self variable, I guess, will be used throughout the code. In JavaScript, it does not, you do not need this as a parameter, and I will show the equivalent to that in a second, but the reason that we use self as a parameter is because if we want to create a variable that is specific only to the class, we will use self dot my var is equal to, we could set it to whatever, 13. Meanwhile, for JavaScript, use the keyword this instead of self. This dot my var is equal to 13. So, to show how this works, when creating an instance of the class, what we want to do, we want to create a variable. Let's call it my class, but no, actually test class. So we are going to set test class equal to my class. Now what this does is create the variable. It creates an instance of my class, but now we could modify test class to change it around however we want, and it will not affect the overall my class. So basically, and actually before I show that, I want to show you guys how you could use my class without setting it to a variable. So if we call my class dot my wait a minute dot my var, there we go. If we call this, let's just if we print my class dot my var and we run the code, we get 13. So the reason we don't want to, I'm pretty sure in JavaScript it's basically the same thing. My class dot my var. Pretty sure, just in case, I'm going to check this real quick. Oh, okay. So when it comes to JavaScript, I believe this is right. But basically, yeah, if we print this or console.log, it will be practically the same thing as over here on Python. But now the thing is, sometimes what we could do, if we want, we could add in another parameter. So let's add in the parameter of value. Let's just say there is a value that we are trying to put into our class when we are creating it. So if we set my var to the value that is passed in when the class is created, well, right here, that's what we're doing. We're setting my var to that value that we choose, I guess. So if we run this code, we'll get an error message because in here we have to include that value. This these parameters are basically the parameters that go in right here. So let's enter in a value, say 7. So now if we run it, we get 7. But the problem is this class with my var set to 7 is not going to be saved later on in the code. And I'm not going to be showing this on JavaScript yet because I'm trying to just explain why we don't do this. So instead of doing that, we are going to set the variable test class to my class, and over here we are going to do the same thing. The way we do this in JavaScript, I guess it's common to use let. So let test class equal to, and when we want to create a new instance of a class, we say new my class. So now, and I forgot, over here we want to, include the value parameters, so we will do value, and down here replace that with value as well. So Now if we were to input 7 right here, the way we will be able to call this variable now is test class dot myvar. Right here we do not need the parentheses right here because the class has already been initiated. But now if we were to run this, oh, sorry, forgot to print it. So if we are to run this code now, we get the value 7. And just to make it different, let's run it again with the value 3. And again down here, I believe it is yeah, it's console.log test class.myvar. So this will basically output the same thing as this over here. So this becomes, and the great thing about this is now anytime that we are to call test class .var after this, it's going to be the same thing. That value is now stored inside this variable. So to go even deeper into classes, we can create functions for a class. So next, let's do get value just for now, just to show how this works. Now again in Python, we want to put in the self parameter so that what this does is we could use other variables from within the class and other functions as well. And so the way we do that is, let's say if we call get value, it will return self dot myvar. So basically self is the same thing as if we said my class dot var, except it's not universally my class, it's just for this instance of my class. So over here we could do for JavaScript, the way that we do this is get value. Again, you do not need to use the function keyword. And right here, since it is not Python, we do not have to have any parameters, but we could do return this. Again, the keyword this is basically a replacement for self in Python, but this dot value. So now over here, what we could do instead of, we could basically run the function. So let's do print. To run this function, we do class dot get value, because that is the name of the function, and we are going to need the parentheses to show, that it's a function. And over here, we would do get value, basically the same thing. So now if we run this, it will output the same thing, but something that we could do right here is something like, we just do, let's say we don't want to use this print across the entire code, so we could do print self.myvar. Now if we are to call test class.getValue and run the code, it does it without us needing, it's calling this function basically, right? So, and to do that over here, console.log and then that would basically give us the same as this over here. So what's interesting is we could literally write a function that works only for this class. So let's say def get let's name this one add3. Takes in the self parameter again. It's all these functions inside of a class are always going to need this self parameter, but now we could do self.value plus equals 3, and then we could return. Actually, no. I'm just going to leave it like that because I want to show another functionality about this. So over here in JavaScript, the way you do that is add3, name the function. Again, you don't need any extra parameters, but we will do self.value, or sorry, this.myvar. Oh, this over here is supposed to be my var, but I'm not exactly sure how to do the same thing in JavaScript, so I'm just going to do it as is equal to this dot myvar plus 3. So I'm just going to leave it at that, right? And so now what we want to do right here, or rather before we call the get value, or let's just run it like this. So yes, 3 is our value that was created when we initiated the class right here. So now what we could do test class dot add3, and that's a function, right? Now afterwards we want to do test class dot get value, again just to see the value after we run the add3 function. So now if we are to run this code, we see that 6 is the final value after running the add3 function. Now before I go on, I just want to do test class dot add3 and then test class dot get value, and again this will basically do the same thing as over here. So I guess in this case Python and JavaScript aren't too different right here in the way that they call functions, but the reason what's interesting about this is, so if we were to run add3 on just my class and then without using a variable, if it just said my class right here and we run add3 and then afterwards we run get value on my class, we would not get we would not get 6 right here, because the different, you know, this value is being stored in test class inside of the variable. That's why it's able to be affected and saved basically. So just one last thing, I want to create a function called addX. So this time it will take the parameters self and x. So practically what it's doing, it's actually I'll get to this in a little second. And it's actually something I forgot to explain about this, but what we want to do for this one, we'll do self.value plus equals x. And so over here we could do add x. Again, you do not need the function keyword, but again, since this isn't Python, we do not need to have the parameter self, but we could use the parameter simply just x. So now we are going to do this. Let's just copy that and paste it right there, and instead we will do plus x. So we are going to change add3 to add x on both programs. And now if we, first of all, if we are to run it like this, we get an error code because we have not input the, oh, sorry, my var. That's what I meant to say. We have not put in an argument right here. So something that I forgot to mention about this over here, self is going to be ignored when calling it as a function over here. And even when the class is initiated. So down here, let's say we want to add 15, right? Down here, 15, that's the x value instead of it being self, because self is just kind of like that first parameter is always going to be for using it down here, for using variables like this. So now basically if we are to run this, you can see it is affected, you know, like I said, since it is stored inside the variable, and then you could see right here, it's just like using a regular function. You can put in parameters and use those parameters, use those values, pass through the parameters inside the code. Now something interesting that I want to show is, let's say when we call the add x function, we want it to just show us we want it to print out the value instead of having to call get value down here. So that's the goal basically. So let's say we want to, now after all of that, we want to run self.getValue. So we are using the keyword self again because it is part of our class, and down here we are going to use the this keyword. So there we go. Sorry, no, not add 3. Get value. There we go. So now if we are to run it like this, we don't even need a get value function under this because it's being called within the add x function. Yeah. So right there, 18 is still printed out. So yeah, that's basically how we could use functions and variables inside of classes, and how to initiate or use the constructor method. And I forgot to say as well, functions inside of just for beginners to know terminology when watching other videos, functions inside of classes are known as methods. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you are watching a video and they mention methods, that's what it is. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's just about it. When it comes to object-oriented programming, there's a little bit more that you should probably know, but this is again sort of an overview, and I would absolutely recommend watching videos on object-oriented programming, because I hear that it's really, really important in the real programming world, and it's something that people use a lot. I remember I used to hate classes, but trust me, they're amazing once you get to understand them. But anyway, that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.